Africa is to become the battleground of this geopolitical tussle between the US and China. I think the warning shots have been fired by what we see in South Africa when the US is sanctioning the ANC leaders. So what lays ahead of us is very scary.
Welcome back to where we are going to further discuss the events in Zimbabwe and the region. To start off with, we are going to talk about our experience of the events of the day. Shumba, any update of what is happening in Zimbabwe?
No, I haven't seen any political headlines today. All I see was sort of, I could say, positive headlines. It was to do with the artificial intelligence. I don't know whether it was a conference or what it was, which was in Rwanda. And I think there are positive things that are coming out of there. So that's what I've been looking at today. And I think following to that, I saw that Strive Masiwa is opening a center in South Africa dedicated to artificial intelligence. We would have loved that center to be in Zimbabwe, but I think he's a shrewd businessman, so he's got his reasons why that center would not be set up in Zimbabwe. So it's a piece of good news to our continent and to our region. So that's what I saw today. Ameno kuti mimi chamaona china asi meme mchifamba.
Kunenge ndikufamba nhasi ndangosangana ne-information yekuti the ruling party ZANU-PF, I think it is now on a massive campaign to recruit content creators to spearhead what they call movement for change. What change, whether is it change for the country or for the party, it's still speculation or it needs an interpretation. And I think I agree with the artificial intelligence. It's actually a key aspect in Africa, because I think the countries that are going to lead in the coming years are the ones that will embrace artificial intelligence, both in not only rhetoric, but with actually real things on the ground. As you can see, China and America, they are actually racing for this dominance in artificial intelligence. Actually, I think next week, Professor
Adam
Tambara is leading a discussion on artificial intelligence in one of the South African universities, and it is a hybrid conference. So I registered to attend virtually, and I think it's quite interesting to stay ahead how artificial intelligence is going to shape the future of Africa.
Yeah, I would love to attend. So if you can put the link so that any of our viewers can also attend the talk, because he's one of the leading sort of voices on artificial intelligence on the continent, and is quite versed on the subject. So yeah, it would be nice to attend.
Yeah, I'll put the joining information in our description on this broadcast. And without further ado, I think today we want to look at in a very important subject. We know America is the top of the top of the talk globally, and today we are going to talk about their sanctions to South Africa and what it will mean to us as a nation and also to South Africa in the region. And for us to lead us in this discussion, none other than Shumba, who is more attuned to geopolitical analysis. Over
Yeah,
to you, Shumba.
yeah. So I think we are in a new Cold War, but unfortunately, I think Africa is going to bear the brunt of this tussle between China and the US. So I think for a variety of reasons, the US have chosen to put sanctions on the ANC leadership. I think it's not only the ANC they are targeting; it's going to be the ANC, EFF, and MK. So I think we'll dig deep to what that means to Africa. But to me, that's an opening salvo of what's coming towards Africa. And Misha, you know, South Africa is the biggest economy in Africa. So if we are on the receiving end, which means they've gone, the consequences are going to be terrible for the masses of African people who depend on South Africa. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think I wrote about this in 2023. This was one of the reasons why uh, this storm is gathering pace on South Africa. So in my blog, is South Africa the weakest link in the BRICS? Why is South African rand imploding? This is what I was alluding to. Of course, there are a few things that I got wrong, but at that time, the Reserve Bank of South Africa actually raised the interest rates by 50 basis points, which means they were afraid of the rand really going down. It managed to stabilize the rand, but I think this time around, they're going to be a lot of the big guns are out, because once they target the ANC leadership, what does it mean for the region, for South Africa and the region? That remains to be seen. So those are the things that we'll be talking about today. So to start off, Misha, if you can just show what has been happening in America in terms of yeah. So we've got this. The U.S. Congress has just introduced a bill to sanction ANC officials. So this bill is going to go through the Congress, and then it's going to go through the House of Representatives. The thing is, both houses now are controlled by the Republicans, and they are the ones who have introduced this bill. So there's a 100% chance that the bill will go through. So for us Zimbabweans, I think we know what this means. We've been there before. We have had our leaders sanctioned. We have had our country sanctioned. So this is not a new thing, and we know what comes through this kind of actions. It's going to be painful. So we are praying for South Africa, but it doesn't look good on a bigger scale, because when you see a superpower like America, we know what they did to Russia. Luckily for Russia, it had prepared for that eventuality for years. But for us, like Zimbabwe, we were not prepared. South Africa, I don't think they were prepared for what's coming their way. So the devastation that will come through those sanctions is going to be really felt on the ground. And normally when they introduce these sanctions, they are trying to to, to put pressure on the public. It's sort of a regime change agenda that normally comes with these sanctions, so that we, the people on the ground, we will put pressure on our leadership so that they act in the interests of America. Because this is just interfering in the internal politics of South Africa. But that's what empires do, unfortunately, and we'll see how it plays. And then I think there's another headline as well. Yeah. So ANC notes US congressman proposed bill calling for sanctions on party leaders. So I think in South Africa, things are not looking good with this kind of actions. So that's where we are in world history. And it's really unfortunate. But where we are is where we find ourselves that, like I said in our previous chart, that we have the world has changed so much in just a few years, and now we have reached the crossroads of history, whereby the supply chains of the world are being broken up. So before we used to have China as the manufacturing factory of the world, and China was getting all the resources from Africa, getting resources from wherever, and then manufacturing goods for the world. So most supply chains were coming from Africa, from China. That's why you were finding the Belt Road Initiative that China was embarking on, so that it could supply finished goods across the world. But now, ever since COVID, things just took a terrible turn. And now there is enmity between the Chinese and the US. And things are out of hand now. And they, they're not gonna sit down and talk together, because what the Americans are afraid of is having China taking the lunch from them, because where we are now is like America perceives China that it wants the hegemonic control of the world that the US currently possess. So if China manages to surpass the US and starts to run the world, which means China will introduce institutions, and it will introduce rules and the international laws that suits China more than it suits the US. Because currently we live in what we call international rules-based order, which were the formulations of the US. So the US is worried. That's why if you listened to Obama, he said we are pivoting to Asia. So the reason why they are pivoting to Asia is to contain China, so that they can always remain the hegemony of the world. So that's where we are in world history. So a Cold War has started. So the starting of the Cold War means the supply chains now are broken. US is going to go to Africa to look for its own raw materials and its own the things that it needs to power its factories. That's why Trump is talking of onshoring, that companies should move to the US to manufacture goods. And then you've got as well China also going around the world looking for the same raw materials. Misha, if you put that picture about how the trade has changed in few years. So this was 2000, and it shows the global dominance of the US and China from 2000 to 2024. If you look at this map, you can see that it was almost the US dominating the global trade in 2000. But look 24 years later, the whole of Africa, I think China is dominating what's going on the continent, and America really is saying enough. So they want to kick China out of the African continent, and for us, it's going to be painful as Africans, because if you have these two elephants fighting within our continent for the control of the resources, then which means we are the grass which these elephants are going to trample on. So we've got a very difficult time ahead of us, and it has already started. Like I said, the reason why Trump is sanctioning the ANC leaders is just the start of that fight for the control of the African continent and its resources.
Yeah. Thank you, Shumba. Before I come to Makabai, can you just give a difference? What might be the difference in response? We know Zimbabwe went through the same route of sanction of our leaders, of our leading companies by US, and what will be the difference in the terms of response from the South African authorities from that which was the Zimbabwean one?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult for South Africa, because you've got the AGOA. They are talking of kicking South Africa after out of the AGOA, and AGOA is the agreement that Africa has with the US, so that the goods from Africa can get into America at preferential rates. So already, if South Africa is kicked out, I'm yet to research how much trade that South Africa does with America, but it might be significant, and that will affect. That's already jobs on the line, because you've got companies that are exporting to America. I think South Africa exports cars to America, so that's going to be a big hit on the South African economy. And then you've got the BRICS. I think behind the veil, the US is worried about the BRICS. Like I said, South Africa is one of the founding members of the BRICS. So the aim of America, it sees BRICS as its biggest threat. I think you remember what Donald Trump said when he came. He said, if the BRICS nations threaten the dollar, we're gonna impose terrible cost on them. So I think Trump is seeing one of the weaker links in the BRICS, and is going in hard on South Africa. So there's the BRICS issue with South Africa, and then there is the ICJ case where South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice, and then there is during the Ukraine war, they suspect that South Africa gave arms to Russia, because there were Russian warships that came and docked in South Africa. And the US claims that those ships actually loaded arms for Russia. So that's one of the things. And then you got this land issue, which is quite similar to ours, because if you remember this, our sanctions in Zimbabwe was after the land distribution, because the way America or the Western powers have always negotiated our independence was for us to have just the political independence, but we don't have the economic independence, because they don't want us to redress the land imbalances that have happened historically. Because in Zimbabwe, for example, we had the Land Apportionment Act that robbed black people of the land. But when we got our independence, we were told you go to distribute land after 20 years. Why after 20 years? Because always they know by that time, immediately after you take independence, the minority population will be very unsettled, and most of them leave, which exactly happened in Zimbabwe. But as the years go by, they start to gain their confidence. That's why in South Africa, I think they left it for too late. And those people have gained so much confidence. And some of the things that they say, you can see that they are actually telling black South Africans that you are immigrants too. You came from up north, so there's no one who is entitled to this land. We are all both foreigners to South Africa, which is really an insult. Can you say the same if you go to Europe or you go to America and say those things as an immigrant? But this is where we are, and for me, I always say it's the powerful that write the rules of the game, and a lot of our white friends in South Africa are, are riding on the power of the American empire or the emperor, Trump. So whatever he says, so they are so happy. They are happy that ANC is in the eye of the storm. They are happy maybe the EFF and the MK are gonna get these sanctions, but the repercussions for us Africans, I think it needs really to be taken seriously, because it will have a devastating effect on the African continent and to our people as well, because it will destroy a lot of economies.
All right. Let me give time to Mr. Makabai from Uganda. What's your take on the you have heard what Shumba had said, and also your own experience of what it means when a leading African economy goes through sanctions?
Thank you very much. The issue of Republican Jason introducing a bill to hold South Africa accountable for supporting American adversaries, like my brother put it. I mean, this is not the first time there have been such relations. There's a tendency of the big brothers wanting their friends to be your friends, and they want to determine who your friends should be, whom you should relate to. And at the end of the day, like he said, what is really behind the scenes is the issue. I think BRICS is a big factor.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental factor. But you must find a scapegoat, something to use to attack that main issue. Because when they talk about their foes, then they are looking at countries like China, which has got a very strong foot on the African continent. I remember going to Johannesburg around 2014, and there is a Chinatown, place where the Chinese have really established a number of their businesses. So you find the issue of sanctions targeting South Africa, which is one of the big economies in Africa, is sending a message to the rest of Africa that if we can hit your big brother, then you must toe the line, otherwise you yourself may just be phased out in terms of relations. And of course, the issue about sanctions is about resource transfer, about trade, about international relations. South Africa is definitely a big economy. It is a big economy economically. It is also big militarily on the African continent, because they manufacture much of their military hardware. And the issue is when such a collision course comes from a power like the US. It is essentially sending a message to the rest of Africa that you must be careful about how you relate to other people that are not friendly to the powers that be, and in this case, the United States of America. We've had a recent observation of tariffs after tariffs and counter tariffs. And in international business, that battle will never benefit anybody. Battles to do with tariffs, the issues to do with tariffs are best negotiated than just imposed out of emotions. And I have a feeling there is more of an emotional drive in this matter than a matter of reason, because when you are emotional, you are likely to make certain mistakes. And we could see the relations that are going on between Canada and the United States of America, whereas the US imposed those tariffs. You find the counter tariffs that the Canadians imposed may be biting more than what the Americans thought they would inflict on the Canadian economy. So it's really a challenge for especially countries that have resources like minerals. The message that is being sent is that, well, if you do not behave the way we want, then we shall impose sanctions. And you see, when sanctions are imposed on leaders of a political party, like my brother rightly put it, it's about sending a message of regime change. And you are looking at the ANC, which this time round came to power after a coalition with NDA. It didn't win outrightly. So it's like it's a weak economy. It's weak on the political scene. So it needs to be dealt with, and they are seeing it. They are seeing it as an opportunity to probably to phase the ANC out of the political scene.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, have a preference for the NDA, which may toe their line. So that's another thing that could be behind the scenes, because why ANC? Why the leadership of ANC? Fine, they may talk about corruption within the leadership. Is it the entire leadership that is corrupt? You're found within the parties.
No,
Struggles.
and it's not even about even if they were corrupt. Is it America's jurisdiction to get involved in their affairs?
Exactly.
Can South Africa point to say these politicians in America, they are corrupt? So it's just stretching it, like you're just telling South Africa how to run their affairs.
And also, why particularly ANC, MK, and the EFF? Why not NDA as well? Because it's a political party. It's a political party in South Africa.
Yeah, because DA is the preferred. It should be the beneficiary of what happens to ANC and EFF and MK. Once you bring those ones down, then I think the calculation is it will favor the DA to take over the reins in South Africa.
Now I think we have explored what might be the reasons behind the sanctions to leadership, political leadership in South Africa. How would region or Africa respond to such a move from America?
Yeah, I think that's what Mr. Makabai, before he dropped out, was saying, that I think really there's not much that Africa can do, because now we are being told to choose sides between China and the US. So what he said exactly was, we hit your big brother. So how is Zimbabwe going to stand up to the US, or
I got disconnected.
Lesotho? Yeah, how is Lesotho going to stand to the US when they see it's like you are brothers, right? And you've got a big brother, you walking along, and someone come and hit your eldest brother, the strong of all of you. You just scatter. You think, oh no, we're not gonna, we can't face this guy. So that's exactly what America is doing to us, because they've just gone for our biggest brother, because they know with the South Africa in the BRICS, right, it can influence the whole continent to go into the BRICS. They can convince us, because South Africa has been had a good voice on the continent. They are very diplomatic. They can reach out to all Africans and say it would be a good idea for us to all join the BRICS. But now, if South Africa is hit with a stick on the head, then most of the countries, we are minnows, to be honest. We have not developed the capacity to defend ourselves. So everyone will be scurrying for cover if Trump comes to say, are you going to be the next to resist me? You just going to worship the emperor. So that's where we are. And probably will come now demanding to say, you give me these resources. If you don't, or stop this business with China. So that's where we are. And we'll see how China is going to play the game, because if China cannot stand up to defend its interest, I don't see how we as Africans, I always say you need to prepare for war in times of peace. But for us Africans, we've gone through colonialism, we've gone through slavery, but it seems we never learned those lessons. I like I like the mentality that the Jews in the Middle East or Israel has, because after the Second World War, with what they went through with Hitler, they said never again. They have nuclear weapons and they've got a mandatory national service. But we who have gone through colonialism, slavery, we've got nothing to our name. By now, Africans should be having nuclear weapons, but we've got nothing to show. And I was reading today, if you see the kind of all the other countries, like even the Middle Powers, who are going into Africa to manipulate Africans for their interests. You've got the UAE, you've got Saudi Arabia, you've got Turkey, you've got India, you've got China, you've got the US itself, you've got Russia. So you've got these Middle Powers and these great powers all in Africa trying to secure their interest in terms of resources. And they're going to cause wars, because if you don't give them what they want, they're going to create terrorists, or they're going to create upheaval, so that once they cause that commotion, they can then have access to the resources. So we are in a rude awakening, and I hope it all plays out until our leaders really come together to say, how do we solve this issue? We are in for terrible times.
I think it will come back to what Mr. Makabai alluded in our last episode, where he says one of the things that we need to focus on for our nation is the basics. I think he mentioned the food security, healthcare, education, and skills that work. And so that if we focus on these things, so that our communities may not necessarily have to depend on what happens across the borders. If we have got our communities that are self-sufficient at household level, the impact will not be as much as when our communities are dependent on the formal economy per se. I don't know what others may think. Do you want to add your thinking again, Mr. Makabai?
Yeah, I think, like my brother has put it, when we see such things happening, we need to learn from our history, from our colonial history, and now the neo-colonial present, the way we are arm twisted. And this arm twisting arises out of the sheer knowledge that you cannot defend yourself anyway.
Exactly.
So even if I slapped you, you will have to put the other cheek, whether you like it or not, because you cannot hit back. Now, what does that mean? That as Africa, we know we are the home of most of the natural resources that the world uses. And we need to know that if we do not manage these resources collectively, the rest of the world has tried its best to ensure that we are fragmented. Look at the United States of America. They were different states, but they saw the importance of uniting. Look at the United Kingdom. They
The
were
European
different,
Union.
the European Union. But Africa, the African Union is just a union of the heads of state summits. I was sharing with a friend who was a diplomat, where they went to Addis Ababa and discussed something. And after they discussed, a certain country, an African country still, that was working on the drafting of that document, brought in something that had not been discussed at all, and made it very pronounced. And that position was a position of a certain bloc that finances the African Union. You can imagine we do not finance it ourselves. So it was, and it really caused friction because the diplomats that had been say, we did not discuss it. How did it feature in this document that we are passing on to the heads of states? And that Ugandan diplomat said the Ugandans opted not to be part of that document because they said, well, this is not what we agreed. And you can imagine that kind of situation, that even when we attempt to have a union of African states, we are not in position to fund it sufficiently ourselves, and we have to rely on other blocks, which blocks then tune what we must. We are really like remotely controlled.
Yeah.
So on the face of it, it's the African Union, but at the back, it's the European Union, it's other forces that are setting
the agenda.
The state. And you look at situations, look at the time when the Arab Spring was at its peak. It mainly focused on the Arab countries on the African continent. And they were almost successful everywhere. You find, I don't know how Egypt managed to jump out of that, because had they hit the head of Egypt, then you would have literally seen almost the entire Arab Africa shattered Of course, Libya went the way it did. There was a lot to it. And that was because I think they had set a bad example for the rest of the world. There's an example of self-reliance, an example of making provisions for the country, for the citizens, more than the developed countries are providing. That's a country I visited and saw empty blocks of flats awaiting fresh graduates to occupy. It was not hearsay. This was all along the way from the Tripoli airport to the empty, waiting for fresh graduates to occupy. And all those were bombed in the process of saying, well, you are removing a dictatorship. And a dictatorship that was alleged to have been killing people. But more people have died now than in the 30 or so years that leader of that country had ruled. So if you seem to be setting a bad example in that, one, you are trying to show that a country can be independent, it can provide for itself, it can provide for its nation, then you have put yourself essentially in a firing line.
Exactly.
Of course, look at South Africa. I think the stance that the ANC took to have an alliance with NDA was putting it on a path, because those were like totally antagonistic. You couldn't imagine that NDA would work with the ANC. But the moment that common point was seen, it is seen as if this is a country that is now ready to stabilize and is likely to take off faster than is envisaged. So you must create such a situation that brings it back to the drawing board. So African unity, African union needs to be a reality in terms of, one, relations. I remember our head of state in Uganda always puts it that he was one person who was really pushing for that union at the end of the day, but he realized that I think that the better strategy is to try to see whether you can have the regional blocks strengthen.
Yeah.
Then the regional blocks merge and form union. Then ultimately, probably you can have a stronger African Union. Now look at the ECOWAS with what is happening. There's that new breed of leaders that has emerged that is trying to make those radical changes in their own countries, to the extent of even opting to secede from the ECOWAS, because at one point in time ECOWAS was threatening to intervene in some of their situations. But here you find a leader that has come out and said, we are against this, we are against it, and they are doing it practically for the good of the country. And then you want to intervene. What does that mean? That you wanted the status quo. And we have had situations that have promoted status quos long past the quos have lost their status.
Yeah, and, because that's why they push for elections and democracy. Yeah, they say now they say, oh, these people, all those leaders, they are coup leaders, they are undemocratic. But how many years have you had those democratic elections, but people's lives never change? Because the people who are being brought to be leaders are actually puppets of foreign interests.
Yeah.
They don't serve the interest of their people. They are just told what to do. You sit here, you enjoy the money we give you and your family, but don't touch this and this. They give you agreements to sign in terms of minerals and things like that. So That's where we are, and salute to
talk
those
about
guys.
agreements.
Yeah.
Talk about agreements. I was talking to a certain minister one time, and he told me they had gone on a negotiation with one of the big financial institutions, and then they were really towing the line where they wanted the interests of the country to be catered for in that agreement. As you notice, many agreements are like sellouts, really. You find, why would such a clause be part of it? So when they noticed this guy was really being very hard, all that they did was, during the break, they engaged him one-on-one. He just told him, oh, by the way, where do you come from? They took him to the live Google map, live. Oh, which is your village? And then zoomed in to the extent that he saw his father seated under a tree.
Wow.
So this is he said, when we call you to such negotiations, it's not that it's that we must get what we want, not what you want. To the extent that really I've shown you that I can even see where your father is seated. What does that mean? That if I want to eliminate you, that is very possible, because we have technology to that. By the time they went back, the man had to soften. Those are things that we are dealing with in this world, that really, unless we are united, unless we think about our defense, unless we think about our food security. I was sharing with a friend recently and saying, the traditional seeds that we had are disappearing, and we are having to depend on seeds from outside our own countries. That is already a tool of
and people see these seedless grapes. They think
and
it's
they are excited about, but you can't plant, you can't reproduce.
What they don't know is this is a monopoly. Who is having the seeds to grow those seedless grapes? So at the end of the day, if that person doesn't provide you with the seeds, you're not gonna grow that seedless grape.
Exactly.
Imagine when the world, the whole of your country now is on seedless grapes. Who's holding the seeds to those seedless grapes?
The one with the
Yeah. What you said, it reminds me when I was growing up. I grew up with my uncle, and he used, when we grow rapok, at the beginning of harvesting, he will go around picking the strong plants. Then that becomes the seed for the next year.
For the next season.
But now, even if you take whatever, if you try to plant it for the next season, it will not grow at all, and you still have got to go and buy the seeds. And over and above the seeds, actually, they are introducing chemicals to kill weeds, which makes our soil unproductive without chemicals. I don't know.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. This is what you need: security in everything. We call it biosecurity. You need your national defense to be up to scratch. You need, even drugs that are now permeating African borders. We never used to have people getting hooked up with some of these drugs that now you find young people getting hooked on. So you need strong borders to be able to control some of these things. A lot of people wonder in Asia, if China, if you caught with the drugs, or Thailand, or or Indonesia, it's firing squad straight away, no negotiation. I think it was last month China killed about five Canadians for drug dealing. So they don't mess around, because you're talking of they've been through that with the opium wars. So China knows the effects of it all. So they're not going to take any chances, because you destroy communities and you destroy society through those things. But here we are, even now our borders are so porous, and we are forced, like through this free trade, to say you cannot erect barriers. Now a chicken coming from Brazil is cheaper than a chicken that's being produced locally, or a chicken from America is cheaper than a chicken that's being produced locally. I think our leaders should take advantage of what Trump is doing to start erecting some of these barriers, so that we can stop things like that destroy our farmers, so that they cannot they cannot produce. Because what people don't know, they think, oh, Africans are less. We have always been farmers. But if you are competing with these large scale farmers from America, from the European Union, who get subsidies, because subsidies for farmers here in the European Union or in America, it's huge, and it's huge big business. And then when you add on top of that what we call aid business. So what America does is, like, they will say, oh, there's gonna be famine in Sudan, famine in Zimbabwe, and they push for the corn or maize corn from their country through the UN to come to Zimbabwe. They won't say to the UN, order some maize from South Africa to take to Zimbabwe. No, they won't do that. So you find that they exaggerate the maybe the famine in Zimbabwe or in Sudan, so that they can push as much of their produce from America to Sudan or to Zimbabwe, wherever they are creating that narrative. So we need to really wake up and start knowing how to protect our farmers, so that we can have that food security that we are looking for.
Yeah, I'm very mindful of your time, Shumba. Mr. Makabai, can you give any closing remarks in terms of what you can tell our leaders now that their big brother is slapped with sanctions?
I think what I can say is that each of the African countries should now wait for its turn in this matter, especially those that know that there are some resources that the big brother may be interested in. They should be ready for their arms to be twisted. So they should start doing exercise, so that when these arms are twisted, they are not broken. Because I will give a case of my own country. My brother talked about
I think his internet is.
Yeah, I think we've lost him.
Yeah, we have lost him. Do you want to give your closing remarks, like what he was going to say to the brothers in Africa when their big brother South Africa is in trouble?
Yeah, so I think I alluded to it to say, so they're gonna come one after the other to the minnows, which are the small guys, to say, which side are you? Because in diplomacy, they call it carrot and stick. Sometimes they use carrot to sweeten you, to say, oh, no, we'll do this for you, we'll do this for you. And then you take a deal that might even affect your own people. But they've given you a carrot. But when they come with a stick, it's either or. If you don't, normally our leaders are told, if you don't do this, we'll take you out of power. And with the way we also all like power, the man will rather sell the country than to lose power or not to play accordingly. So that's where we are in world politics. Like I said, in conclusion, we are in a cold war between the US and China. So we are the minnows caught in between, and we need to know how to play the game. I think we are way past the time that we could strategize because, like I said, you need to prepare for war in times of peace. We had peace for quite a number of years after the end of the Second World War, but we didn't take advantage of that to prepare ourselves for times like this. So it remains to be seen. We remain hopeful for our continent, but we also need to our viewers to be aware of what's coming down the line, so that we are not surprised if we see all these proxy wars, like my brother mentioned about the Arab Spring. That's how it will start. They create those situations. They are masters of it. So they will create something, and then it will be. I even wrote about it to say an Africa Spring is coming towards our way, and they know we have got young population which can easily be agitated, which can easily be persuaded, and if these leaders don't start taking action now to be on the side of these young populations, they'll they'll be held to pay coming down the line. So I think that will be my conclusion for tonight.
And thank you, Mr. Makabao. You were on in the middle of saying we must be
Yes, I was
prepared for
talking about
being
something. I was saying,
arm twisting, and if you need to exercise so
yeah,
that when you are arm twisted, you will not break.
yeah. And like I was saying, there are certain things. You find a very small by-election that we held. Little did we know that this was an issue that was drawing even the attention of the UN Security Council,
Wow.
whereby some of the players in that by-election had appealed to the UN Security Council for a right to protect. They were expecting the result to come out in a certain way, and that if it turned out in a certain way, then the UN needed to intervene. And that one is based on a situation where if a certain number of lives are lost in that activity, then the UN steps in.
Will get
And
involved.
fortunately, the way I managed that election was such that I engaged the security agencies with the candidates, whereas there were certain skirmishes here and there between supporters of certain candidates and the security. At least no life was lost. Otherwise, probably the situation in Uganda would be totally different as of now. And like my brother said, the young generation, the young unemployed are the people we should really think about, because these are the ones who will be used to cause turbulence. They have nothing to lose. They have no job, they have no house, they have no nothing. Probably they have only the piece of just the clothes they are wearing. Just give them a little drugs and they will burn your country. So our country should be mindful about the Gen Zs. Take a case of Kenya recently when there were those demonstrations.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are things we are not
It's
supposed to
only that
lightly.
those demonstrations, they were on the, it was against their interest. That's why they didn't really make so
Yeah,
much noise on the world scene,
yeah,
because
yeah.
those
Because I
Gen
remember the
Z were
youth that said
against the IMF and the World Bank's policies on Kenya. Mm. So it was
yeah,
hitting the pockets of the powerful. That's why it didn't make so much noise.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
we,
all in all, that bill, I mean the sanctions, are first of all an immediate tool You see, if you impose sanctions on a certain leadership from one country, one, they can get what they need from another country. They can, but what you are hurting is the local population. So at times, some of these sanctions end up being misdirected. For those, if you are targeting the leaders will make sure they access what they need, whichever way, and then the common person will be the one, it will be transferred. Like you impose a tax on somebody and he shifts it down and avoids it and transfers that tax to somebody. But all in all, Africa needs to realize that it's only in unity that they will have strength, that they will have the sufficient bargaining power to prosper, to survive first of all, and to prosper. That's all I can say for now.
Thank you very much, and I can't thank you enough for your valuable insights. And for our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and whoever will be watching this as a replay, thank you for tuning in to the channel. We will be back again with another episode where we give you valuable information on current affairs and the issues of development. And thank you for now.